A number 10 with a lot of potential to simply become one of the best in Europe made a change in his career that got the whole footballing world frustrated about seeing his talents wasted in an up-and-coming league with very little quality and a decreased amount of audience interest. A player like Oscar did not need to join Shanghai SIPG Football Club, as they were known at the time. A true favourite at Chelsea Football Club and throughout the whole of Brazil too. He was simply a footballer with an astonishing amount of talent. But why waste it with this sudden move to Asia? Oscar's story is quite magnificent from a footballing fan's perspective. Obviously from Brazil and grew up in Americana in Sao Paulo. He had a very tough upbringing as well. He lost his father when he was just 3 years old in a car accident. This left his mother to bring up 3 children, and she was also pregnant at the time during the accident too. And Oscar stated how hard it was not having his dad at footballing events when he got into his career. Oscar's father did leave the family a house, but the mother really couldn't get any kind of work because she had to look after her children. She resulted in selling her own clothes and the family's clothes just to try and make ends meet for the family. At the young age of just 12 years old, Oscar would join Ipiranga and later on would then be at Sao Paulo. From the youth ranks to the senior squad, he made his debut for the senior side of Sao Paulo in 2008, and things soon advanced to 2009 with an impressive campaign. He made a real good name for himself with goals in the Copa Sao Paulo youth tournament. And later on in that year, he got an assist against Corinthians as well. Mauricio Ramalho, who was the manager at the time for Sao Paulo, stated Oscar to be a classic number 8 from his own perspective. His time at Sao Paulo was about to come to an end, a contract renewal issue which led to him exiting the club. His agent claimed the salary wasn't being made. Oscar wanted his money just like anyone else would. Football for him was a joy, but he did see this as a career and a job as such. And this exit was probably needed too. He didn't fit in the 3-5-2 that Ramalho set up formation-wise. He was a classic number 10, a central attacking midfielder or a central playmaker. That was the kind of role he thrived off. He was leaving Sao Paulo with potential, and find out later on in the video what might be happening with his career to the present date. This led to Internacional. He joined as a free agent, but there was a court case that was led actually, with Sao Paulo believing Oscar was still contractually theirs. Because of this, Oscar wasn't able to play any minutes in the Copa Libertadores tournament for Internacional, the huge South American tournament, by the way. Eventually, a settlement was made for 6 million between the two clubs, and Internacional had their new number 10. He made a name for himself, not just at the club, but for Brazil, and his name rippled out the whole country as less than a year after joining the club, he was making his senior appearance for Brazil. As any club do, they experimented with the team. They used Oscar as a second striker at times, but something that this role did require that Oscar took out through his whole of his footballing career was creative responsibility. He set up his striker up front with him, the Argentinian Andreas Di Alessandro, and formed a good midfielder relationship with Andre Zinho during his time at the club. Domestically great, but then came more international success. He was performing very highly with the under-20 Brazil side, created another great midfielder relationship at his time with the under-20s with Casemiro and Fernando. He would also set up and allow Coutinho to have that number 10 role. In this competition, Oscar scored a hat-trick in the under-20 World Cup final, hitting world news, comparing it to Jeff Hurst, as no one really had scored a hat-trick before in a World Cup final rather than them two. And things were moving quickly for Oscar, and he was still just at 20 years of age. This moment really hit home on a Brazilian scale. The fans loved him, and so did the Brazilian FA. So much that this was actually what handed him his first senior call-up. Advance a year later and the lad goes off to the London 2012 Olympics with Brazil, catching the eyes of audience in England. Neymar was the talk of the town, but towards the end of the tournament, everyone was talking about Oscar. And being in England was soon going to be a familiarity. He then joined Chelsea on the 16th of July 2012 for a fee around 20 million. It was time to see this talent on a huge English Premier League scale, but everyone knows that is ultimately a worldwide scale. Roberto Di Matteo had just won Chelsea the Champions League in shocking fashion, and needed to bolster the attack. He realised the charm and quality in the midfielder. He said, "He is a fantastic player, one of the youngest to push through to Brazil's national team." He was going to be joining alongside other playmakers too, Eden Hazard and his brother Thorgan, and also the German midfielder Marco Marin. And it was tough competition within the squad to start each week in the Premier League. However, Oscar did see minutes in the Champions League. He made his Champions League debut in Chelsea's actual first group stage match against Juventus, and he scored 2 goals. Advanced 2 months later, and he then scored his first Premier League goal in that absolute thrashing against Villa, 8-0. And by this point, he was a major role in Brazil's senior national side. And the numbers really proved it. In his first Chelsea season alone, he scored 12 goals and assisted 9 in 64 games for the Blues. He knew he needed to work on his game. He was somewhat shy on the field. Oscar stated once, "On the field, sometimes it even forced my friends to say something," and said his teammates insisted he would talk more and ask for the ball more. Oscar realised he was quiet, but he would become a lot louder the season after. Advanced to his second season at Chelsea, and he scored the club's opening league goal in 2013 against newly promoted side at the time, Hull City. He had made a good early impression under new boss Jose Mourinho. Mourinho didn't have any role for Juan Mata to be utilised in the way Jose played. And Mata realised this as he had just had an injury, and by the time he had returned, Mourinho had picked his team. It was obvious that Oscar was the preferred player under Mourinho, and it just shows for it as well because he was such a good playmaker under the Portuguese boss. He had a man of the match performance as he scored and assisted 2 in a 3-0 win over Southampton. He did dive in this game, and that frustrated current Saints keeper at the time, Kelvin Davis. He also added the 4th and 5th goals in the match against Arsenal, Chelsea winning 6-0 that day, and it was also Arsene Wenger's 1000th game in charge. This was also the same game Kieran Gibbs was sent off by Andre Mariner when it should have been Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. At the end of the season, he racked up 11 goals and 7 assists in 33 games for the Blues. Another great season in the Premier League with a 3rd place finish, with Liverpool and Manchester City finishing above Chelsea. And the season after showed even more Oscar success, but with Didier Drogba returning to the club, Oscar gave up the 11 kit number, a humble gesture for a club legend. Oscar would pick up the number 8 with the departure of Frank Lampard as he joined Manchester City. It was a very good campaign for the new number 8. He scored twice in the first half against Swansea. Good performance against Crystal Palace that same season too. And while the iron is hot, good form did sadly come to an end, with Oscar picking up a hamstring injury that saw him miss the last 5 games of what was a great season for Chelsea in the Premier League. They ended up winning the league that season, and Oscar had a Premier League medal. There was also domestic success as well, with the Blues winning the League Cup. Oscar would play 2 more seasons for Chelsea after this, became a real popular figure for the club. I mean, seeing Didier Drogba, a club legend, come back, handing him his own actual kit number, what he was known for, to then straight after this take another kit number from a legend is impressive. By the end of his Chelsea tenure, he had played 203 games for the club across 5 seasons. A drop of form was seen from the Brazilian and soon recognised when Antonio Conte came into the club. He dropped him to the bench a lot of the time. Interest was then built from surrounding clubs in Europe. Inter Milan, Juventus and Atletico Madrid were all after Oscar. And you just have to remember, a 25-year-old Brazilian midfielder, number 10, real good, creative playmaker. Clubs are going to want him, whether he's in good form for Chelsea in the Premier League or not. But then came something we did not expect. No one expected. The Chinese Super League was starting to rise. It had a massive rebrand in 2004, and by the 2010s, the heat was really turning up. They were trying to attract some of the world's best football players, and that's something that is mirrored to this current day that Saudi are trying to do now. But what was scary is they were somewhat succeeding. I'm really intrigued to see what has happened in terms of the decline in the Chinese Super League. I mean, it is obvious that there is a decline in the Chinese Super League. We're not really seeing any big name transfers going to play for the clubs over there anymore. So if you'd like to see that in another video, please like and subscribe to show your support for that one. But yeah, it was a league that almost got Gareth Bale once, but it did get one great Brazilian young talents. But by this point, he was a Brazilian regular in the team and a Chelsea great. Oscar joined Shanghai SIPG, as it was known back then, in the January transfer window of 2017 for £60 million, which is still the most expensive transfer in the Chinese Super League. He signed a 4-year contract and had a weekly salary of £400,000. He was to become one of the world's most highest paid footballers at the time too. He would also be joining his Brazilian teammate Hulk At the age of 25, he had 2 Premier League medals, a Europa League medal and a League Cup medal. He had also won the Confederations Cup with Brazil in 2013. One word that came from Oscar was success. At this age, with these amount of medals, he could have probably chose any club he wanted. He has a record that's shared with one other player in a tournament that almost goes back 100 years, and that player he shares that with doesn't even play football anymore. So why China? He was saying goodbye to the best league in the world and the best clubs tournament in the world, being the Champions League, and he was swapping that with the Asia Champions League. It was money, and there was no surprise there either, but he was earning a real good amount at Chelsea. However, 400,000 a week is at another level. And despite China or not, Atletico Madrid did actually come in first before Shanghai, but Chelsea would not sell. He talks about it more in 2017. He said, "All football players want to earn money to help their families. When I made the decision to come here to China, I was thinking more of my family than of my career." Oscar also admitted the incredible power that these Chinese markets have, the wealth they can supply these footballers with, and how hard it is to not refuse these kind of offers. If we move out to the present day, we really do see that in Saudi as well. But back to it, he was open and honest at the start of his career at Shanghai Port what the plan was. He said, "I hope that in 2 or 3 years' time I can go back to a big team in Europe. What I enjoy most is playing at a high level. I am still young. I can return." He actually planned for this Chinese Super League move to just be a temporary thing. His family were really struggling still, and Oscar wanted to change their lives around, and with that kind of money, who's going to say no? However, what was a 2 or 3 year temporary plan actually turned into 7 years. And over these 7 years, he picked up £175 million through his salary at the club. But his career in China, forgetting about the money and focusing on the football, was unreal. During his 248 games for Shanghai, he scored 77 times. He became the 2nd highest goal scorer in Shanghai's history. He won the league with Shanghai 3 times, won 2 domestic cups with them too. This transfer definitely saw it reward trophy-wise anyway, but definitely not financially, as the Chinese Super League really declined by the start of the 2020s. Oscar stayed though. He clearly loved football over there and loved the club he was playing for. He was still getting interest from outside of China too. Barcelona was one of them. Xavi, who was managing them at the time, showed real interest to Oscar and wanted his talents and experience for their youthful midfield. A player who was definitely a guaranteed starter for Brazil between 2012 to 14 knew that this was going to become less and less with a move to China. However, the agenda was very clear, financial reasons, and as football fans you have to respect a player's change in career with clubs, as it is their life at the end of the day. But the eyes of football were still impressed and thankful for Oscar's time. Victor Pereira, the manager of Shanghai at the time when Oscar joined, thought the Brazilian really hit the ground running and hugely inspired the players to achieve the club's first ever league title. He realised how well Oscar's game was, saying when he was in form, he could transform games. In an interview with The Athletic, he said, "You also need a strong personality to understand the limitations of your teammates and help them to grow. If you go there with the right attitude, you will make friends and help others improve." That's what Oscar did. He'd done so much for the club over the years. Oscar scored 12 goals and assisted 19 times in that first season for Shanghai. It was Edward Still, the brother of that guy, a man who was assistant coach to Ivan Leko, who took charge of Shanghai Port after the exit of Pereira. Edward really felt this was more than a money move for Oscar. He felt Oscar had a great attitude for the whole club, and he really saw the true personality from the 25-year-old from minute one. Edward said this in an interview once: "There was definitely a massive responsibility on him from a media and a supporter perspective. We had some important Chinese players as well, but nothing on this level. All eyes were on him, all the time." Oscar took that responsibility seriously, he really did. He brought quality to the team and added publicity and gave them a lot more visibility. It was a win-win situation for everyone. It wasn't just him taking all the cash and all the attention, he was making them all better. The coaches all felt comfortable knowing that Oscar had really suited life in Shanghai. It was really obvious too why he wanted to spend 7 years at this football club. The life was perfect for not just him, but for the whole family. And Pereira summed things up nicely for the Brazilian. He said, if he didn't like it, he wouldn't be there. Oscar would now say goodbye to football in China after deciding he won't be renewing his contract. Once again, reason behind this decision is family. He wants to be closer to them and personally looks to maybe return to Brazil. Oscar said his goodbyes in the game against Guangzhou on the 3rd of December 2024. He gave up a bit of his career. That's what Victor Pereira said in an interview as well, and how true it was. It was a selfless change in his career as Oscar wanted just the best for his family. There may not have been this glamorous move to Barcelona when they probably really needed him at the time before Xavi got departed, and there wasn't 5 or 10 more years devoted to Chelsea, and there wasn't a playing career at Atletico Madrid where he could have maybe broken more records. Instead, there was this beautiful life that he made in Shanghai, and the fan base cried out in his final game, "Please stay, Oscar." But the footballing fan in me does wonder, with complete curiosity, how many more footballing records could he have broken if he had just stayed in Europe's top leagues. He might have been able to get a Champions League medal after all, something he never won. And yeah, Brazil does look to be his next destination. His sisters are going to be having children themselves, and his mother is getting older. So a return to Sao Paulo is very much on the cards. Their current coach, Luis Zabaldia, I believe I pronounced that right, has admitted he wants a traditional number 10. And from a footballing fan perspective, how great would it be for Oscar to show his talent and his worth in a shape that suits him? He was never able to do that when he was at Sao Paulo previously. And I can't help but think how many clubs need a player like Oscar right now, particularly in the Premier League. You know, clubs like Everton, West Ham, Wolves that are struggling big time. You know, they might be able to support his wage demands, but definitely not a 6-figure one. But it would also be an absolute honour again to watch Oscar in the Premier League. He did have a long tenure at Chelsea, but I would absolutely love the fact of Oscar returning to English football. For me myself, it was so cool watching Chelsea in the 2010s as well, and Oscar was a big part of that. Ultimately though, his transfer activity ricochets off his love for his family and how much he wants to support them. This has been me, Rob, on the Footy Agenda. Please show your support for the channel with liking this video, and if you want to see more content from myself and others, then please also hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching. All the best and goodbye.